Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Zamfira from Zamfira Games, and this is another episode of the Desert Wildlife Park. And today we are going to build a habitat for the Somali wild ass. This is an animal from the newest DLC, the Arid Animal Pack, and I'm super excited to show you how I built this habitat. In my opinion, this is, for now, the best habitat in this zoo, and let's get started. So for this habitat, I actually built some items like this fence and some fencing and doors for the inside shelter and also for the outside of this habitat, because I wanted to implement in my general building that I like pre-do some fencing and like some inside shelter stuff that I can use basically like a preset. So it is a little bit easier for me to build habitats and especially shelters, because I don't know if you are the same like me, but when I build a habitat, I normally start with the outside habitat, and the inside or the interior of the shelter and backstage area is mostly the last thing I build. And by the time I start to build the interior, I'm almost like 2 hours in, or sometimes even more, in building a habitat. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but after some time, I'm just getting a little tired, and I just want to finish building a habitat. I mean, it's still a lot of fun, but I just get a little, uh, you know, I don't know how to tell, but it's just getting a little itchy. So I wanted to start doing like little presets that I can use on my own, especially for the interior, that I can use throughout multiple habitats, especially like similar animals like hoofstock animals. You can do the inside shelter really similar to like the gazelles and antelopes and the Somali wild ass, for example. So that's what I did this time. So you won't see me building the actual fences or like the little parts of the fences. Um, but you've already seen me do some in other episodes, and I will definitely upload a basically a preset of these things in the Steam workshop once I have some more collected, or when I have like a good base for the whole zoo where I have multiple choices. For like different fencing and interior stuff, and I will upload that on the Steam workshop once I have like a really nice base so I can share it with you. And maybe I'm gonna do like a slow build episode of like a tips and tricks and building tutorial on how to do these um, fencing and doors and stuff like that. But yeah, just as a little disclaimer here, that you won't see me do these things in this episode actually. But let's actually start with the habitat. So this is actually one of the very first habitats in the zoo. You might see it in the video that you can see the entrance right behind this habitat. Um, and what I wanted to do was this little water hole, and I wanted to make some plants in front of it, so you don't have like a really good view right when you come into the zoo, but you can already have like a little glimpse of what is coming when you keep walking a little bit down the path. So I made this little raised plant bed that's also the barrier for the habitat, at least in this small area. And yeah, and I also filled up the space in front of it with some other plants and basically some bushes and trees, just to make a little bit more interesting and do some more gap fillers. As I said in like the last episode or the last two episodes, I'm definitely gonna do a tutorial on how to fill in those gaps once I have a little more of the zoo completed. I might start it when I have all the habitats for the arid animal pack animals finished, and when I have like a good base of the zoo and a lot of the pathing fixed, and then I will start filling in the gaps. I will do some, of course, while building habitats, like in this case, but I still have a lot of open spaces, and I don't really have built any like guest viewing areas. So that's something I'm gonna do in another episode, because I just think that it's gonna be too much if I do it in a habitat building episode, because they are normally between 20 to 30 minutes long alone, and if I would also build like guest viewing areas, it would be just a little too long. So you can be excited for another episode of that. But yeah, what did I think for this habitat? For this one, I actually wanted to do a fence, as you can see here, with the wooden pieces that is like really close to the pathing and the animals, so that the guests can actually come up super close to the fencing and the animals if the Somali wild ass decides to come up to the fence. It is of course high enough that the animals can't like jump over it or something like that, but the guests can actually have a really nice view and be really up close to the animals. I think that's always something super cool if you are really close to the animals. And since the Somali wild ass is a animal that lives in like arid areas, of course, this is a desert animal, but in like these hilly, stony, rocky areas, and grasslands, I kept the habitat pretty flat for the most part, and also, well, pretty dry, of course. We don't have a lot of green foliage. We have some trees, of course, to also give the animals some shading, some natural shading, so they don't have to be in like the full-on sun the whole day. And we have many rocks and these pebbles. These are the faux rocks pebbles that I just did in a little clump of various of these pebbles, and just used them, copied them, and of course rotated them throughout the whole habitat. And some of them were like more over the ground and some are more sunken into the ground. That really gives you a lot of variety for the look of it, although it is the same pile of rocks all over again. And of course we have many branches in there, because you need to have something in the habitat that is still like pretty and a lot of things to look at, even though you don't have like a really green or much foliage in the habitat. So instead of plants, you can use some trees and branches, of course. Here I again use the presets from Caesar Creates, because they are just amazing and I love using them. So I can definitely tell you to check these out. These are just gorgeous, and I'm just a little too lazy to make some on my own. I definitely want to do more things on my own. I try to not use too many preset things or like Steam Workshop things, but the rocks and trees from Caesar are just gorgeous. I need to use them. And yeah, I already had a pretty designated area for this habitat. As you can see, the pathing was already pretty fixed. So that's why I did the front of the habitat, and then like in the middle jumped back and did backstage area and the inside shelter, because I had like this fixed place where it needed to fit, and before I add like too much foliage and needed to delete it later because it wouldn't fit in this area, I just did the shelter basically in the middle of building everything. And yeah, for this one, I wanted to do it a little bit different than the other two shelters or backstage areas I have. I used these really white walls. I'm not quite sure how they're called. But I really like the look of the white walls with the natural roof. So that's what I wanted to do with this one. And here you can already see me using my pre-made fences that I did on my own. I'm probably gonna use them to also put them into the other two habitats I did, which are the Dama Gazelle and the Addax. They are pretty similar from the inside, but these fences I did before I built the Somali wild ass habitat are just way better, so I'm probably gonna just change them. Yeah, to also have this neat look throughout the whole zoo, and that everything is just um, well, looks somewhat the same. So yeah. And of course, we have a lot of bedding for the animals. I think the inside area is a little bit big because we only have 3 of the Somali wild ass in this habitat. I originally wanted to do like 4 or 5 of them, but as soon as I put like everything down and then the animals in, I realized that the traversable area from the Somali wild ass is a little bit finicky, and they need quite a lot of space, like in between certain objects, especially the trees that I use. I don't know if it's the trees or if it's the animal itself, but the hitbox is just really big, and I later needed to move some of the things just a little bit so that the animals could actually walk through them, and that's why the area, or like the usable area for the animals, is much smaller than the area is well, basically on its own, if you know what I mean. I planned it out for like 4 animals, and I checked in the Zoopedia, and it was more than enough space for them. And as soon as I put them down, it was like telling me, oh, no, it's a little bit, it's not enough. I mean, I know it's sandbox and I can turn it off if I want to, but I just want to use this to give it a somewhat realistic base for it, and also to help me figure out how big I need certain habitats to be, or not to make them too big, you know, because especially with smaller animals, it can be really, like, not dangerous, but you tend to make habitats too big, and the animals get basically lost in the habitats. Especially if you don't have like 15 of the animal in one thing, it can be hard for the guests to find them. So I just use the Zoopedia for like an idea of how much or how big the habitat should be. So yeah. And here you can already see me building the roof. It was a little bit finicky because the items or the roof pieces wouldn't like click into the wall pieces quite right, or like into one another, so I had to use the precise movement, but I think it came out really good. I really like it. So yeah, that's basically everything we want. And you can see that the shelter has like a little open side on one side, because the Somali wild ass will get some neighbors in the next episode, and they will also have like a shared inside shelter, similar to the Addax. There you might have seen already that they will also have neighbors inside the shelter, and that's what I do for this habitat too. And here I did this double fencing in between those habitats. So it is still somewhat open and something different than just a rock wall. I saw this with other creators. They did this with like the double fencing and some foliage in there, so that the animals are not like constantly looking at each other and might get irritated if they are maybe animals that don't necessarily like each other. But for this one, it shouldn't be a problem. So you can be excited for the next episode. Um, yeah. And here you can see me just going back and seeing which areas need to be improved or which areas are still open, and what to do with like the whole front of the habitat, because it still looked a little open and I didn't quite know what to do with the whole space. And I just decided to do another little plant bed to the front of the habitats, but basically in between of those. So you still have like a little bit of a visual barrier, we could say. But yeah, these are just things I come up super spontaneously. I don't plan all plant beds out up front. These are just things I go with the flow. I said that some time ago. I'm not really a really good planner for like habitats or like zoos in general. For this zoo, I actually did plan out everything. When it comes to the layout of the zoo, where the pathing goes, which animals go where, and where I will have like guest facilities like the restaurant or maybe a little playground and stuff like that. But when it comes to the habitat itself, to the look of it and the shelters, I planned out where the shelters go and which animals are gonna be in the same building basically, or yeah, basically where the staff can access multiple habitats or animals from one backstage area. But yeah, from the look, I just go right when I start filming. I just look up some stuff. When, for example, the Zoopedia, what are the requirements for the animal? And of course, I Google some stuff, what they need, where they normally live. And of course, try to get some inspiration from like Pinterest and Google, not only for the animal itself, but generally for the type of habitat I'm going. For example, this is like a whole desert zoo, so I have like a whole board on Pinterest with like desert themed habitats and also other things like architectural stuff. And then I just use these inspirations to do habitats like this. And of course, other YouTube videos and sometimes Reddit posts and stuff like that. So yeah, we are almost finished with the habitat. You can see here in the background I had still a little open area, but I didn't want guests to be able to see inside the habitat from there, because I just like to keep the viewing areas a little bit more limited for each habitat, so that the guests can't see everything from all around the habitat, and there's like designated areas where they can see things, and of course to give the animals a little bit more privacy, where they can just little chill out and don't have like a whole flock of guests staring at them. So yeah, and that's why I used these bigger beams, wooden beams. On the other side are going to be something different for the guests to look at or maybe go into. So yeah, I still keep everything interesting from all of the points where the guests can go from every path, but they don't necessarily need to see animals or into the habitats from everywhere, because that's what I feel like is also in real zoos, that you sometimes just walk through some foliage or some other interesting stuff and can't really see animals or inside a habitat. And yeah, as some last finishing touches, I used this really dried up grass and lowered it into the ground, so it's just the tips of the grass, so it doesn't look too full, but that the plain and flat areas are still covered with something, because I personally don't really like the look of just plain areas. I mean, it always depends what you're building, but I usually prefer it if there's at least some pebbles and some grass. And of course, we are also decorating the wall of the building. That's something I definitely need to practice, because I tend to leave walls of buildings pretty bare. And yeah, and I just came up with the idea, or maybe I saw it somewhere, I don't even know right now, where they had these beams just up on the wall, these little tiny ones that are also pretty irregular, as you can see here. And I really like the look of it, I really like the result of it, and it's going to be all around the whole building. So yeah. And I did the interior, some like backstage pieces off camera, so you will see that in the cinematic shots that are about to come, and also in the beginning. And that's basically it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment and a like if you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you on the next one. Until then, bye guys!